Hey y'all. Hi everyone. So today I will be talking about marriage based green card fraud investigations. Wow, that goes away. So I'll be talking about marriage-based green card fraud investigations, what that has to do with home visits, how all of that plays together in your marriage-based case. So if you are interested in that, please stick around. I'll be going over, what leads to a fraud investigation, what they do during a fraud investigation, and what happens at a home visit. Okay, so if you don't know me, I am Lillian Chukura. I'm a US based immigration lawyer, and I help my clients get green cards and citizenships using the US immigration law system. If you are interested in having a private consultation with me, you can do that by scheduling a strategy session on my website, lilylegal.com, or by calling my office at 508 443 1788. All right, let's jump right in. So, this week's topic is all about marriage fraud investigations. I really wanted to cover this topic because I've had it come up many times. People asking me questions about these investigations. What does it mean? How long does it take? All these questions. So, today I want to start off talking about what even leads to a marriage fraud investigation. Because sometimes we are so focused on the end result, which is the investigation, the home visit, all of that. But let's talk about what leads to that. Okay. So typically when you file a marriage-based green card, you present evidence of your relationship. You may have an interview. If you do have an interview, this is where the fraud investigation usually is triggered, is from the interview. Okay. So if you have an interview, this is why I have a whole video on preparing for marriage based green card interviews because this is where the investigations are triggered. Okay, so typically in the US, if you're filing for a green card based on marriage, you and your spouse must appear for the interview. The officer will question you and your spouse, and sometimes they question you together, sometimes they question you separately. And when they're questioning you separately, they're really trying to figure out if your answers match. Does it make sense that these two people are in a marital relationship? Right? Is there inconsistencies in their answers? Do I have doubts that these people live together? Right? These are the questions that the officer is, thinking about, questioning while they're asking you questions and listening to your answers, because whew, your answers is what's going to trigger a fraud investigation. Okay. So if you go to an interview and you and your spouse give different answers to basic questions. So, for example, if the officer asks how you met and when you met, were you introduced by someone, and you and your spouse give two completely different answers, well, that's a red flag, right? That's a red flag that the officer is going to note. They don't even know when they met each other. They don't know how they met each other. They don't know, where the other person was living when they met each other. They don't know how long they were dating for. So those type of questions really, really is important to get right, because if you don't, red flags. Okay. Another set of questions that really trigger fraud investigations are questions regarding where you live, right? If there's any kind of confusion, questions about where you live, where you and your spouse live, that red flag is going to potentially lead to a fraud investigation. Okay. So if you leave your interview knowing that you have inconsistencies, knowing that, the officer hasn't made a decision and they say expect something in the mail, I have to do some research. Just know there's a potential that the officer is going to send your case to the fraud unit, and they're going to do the investigation to see if you and your spouse actually live together, actually present yourselves as husband and wife, actually present yourselves as a married couple. Okay, so what does it mean to present yourself as a married couple, and what does the fraud investigation unit actually do to find this out? Well, remember, this is a branch of the government. The government has access to almost everything that you have done, right? When you fill out government forms, housing, food stamps, any of those things, when you fill it out, USCIS has access, right? They can get access to that. So when you're filling, so for example, we've had cases where a potential client came to us, we're reviewing their stuff. They had a fraud investigation. The fraud investigation unit found that when the spouse filed for housing, they said that they were not married. They basically presented to housing, to HUD, that they were not married. So if you're presenting yourself to a government entity that as you're not married to get a benefit, USCIS is then going to question whether you're also lying to them, right? Are you lying to HUD or are you lying to USCIS, right? And if you're lying, why are you even lying, right? Why are you not telling HUD that you have a spouse, right? So all those things is what they can find out from an investigation. All right. So if you're filing taxes, if you are part of your community, if you are on social media, right? If you're on social media, if your kids are on social media, if your spouse is on social media, if you were previously married and your ex is on social media, and USCIS has questions of whether you're really, with your current spouse, or if you're still with your prior spouse, they're looking at everything and everyone. Okay. So when it comes to the fraud investigations, just know they are looking at everything that they have access to. All right. One thing that I that happened recently is a potential client came in and we're just having a conversation about, when they got married, when they divorced their ex, and all those things. And I had to, I'm like, hold on one second. I went on my computer, I looked up their divorce filing. I was able to see the complaint and everything, printed it out and showed it to him. I'm like, hey, this is what it says on your divorce filing, but this is what you're telling me, right? Those are public records. Anything you file with the court is public records. Police reports are public records. All right. So when you're pulled over by the police and you give them an address that's not your marital address, or you say that you're not married when you are, or every time that the police has any interaction with you, you are with your ex-husband. Every single time they have an interaction with you, every time they call, the police is called because of an abuse or an assault or anything, is with someone other than your spouse. Those are things that USCIS investigations can find. So again, those are public records. I can even find it if I have the right information about you and your spouse, your ex, everything. Okay. So it is so important that you know what they're looking at. And what they're looking at is everything that they have access to. Okay. So as far as documentation, they're looking at everything they have access to as a government entity. Okay. So everything you do with the government, anything that's public records, so anything with the court, anything with the police, they will most likely have access to. If I, as a lawyer, and you, as a private citizen, have access to it. So most courts, you can go on their website, you can put in the person's name, and it will show up, it will pull up every single time they've been in court, right? If there's a restraining order, if there was, an assault and battery charge, and the person that was assaulted is considered a household member because you live in the household with them, but that's your ex, and the address is not your marital address, right? Those are things that fraud investigations look at. And then let's talk about home visits, because this is where, if, let's say all your documents show married, you did all of, all of those things, you never gave the wrong address, you never interacted with your ex, your marriage is real, right? Your marriage is real, and you have behaved and portrayed yourself as in a marital relationship, right? If that's all USCIS finds during that investigation, they may stop there, right? They may stop there and approve your case and you move forward. What the next step is if they found some things that are just not, they're still not clear, they're still not sure if you live together, that's where the home visit comes in, right? The home visit is where a USCIS officer from the fraud unit, most of the time it's 2 of them, that go to your marital home, right? Most of the time they go to your marital home, but I will tell you, they go to other homes too. So stick around. So they come to your marital home, they knock on the door. So, if you're home, you open the door, they talk to you. They ask if they can come in. They ask where, if your spouse is not home, they ask where they are, if you can call them to come home, right? When they ask to come in, if you say yes, they come in, they look around. What are they looking for, right? They are looking for evidence that you and your spouse live there. Remember, you had an interview. You told USCIS that you and your spouse live together. You told USCIS that you and your spouse know everything about each other. You two live in the same household. You know when your spouse wakes up, you know what they eat, blah, 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 right? Now they come to your home, your marital home. They come in, and everything in there is just yours, right? Let's say you're a man and they knock on the door, they come in, everything in the home belongs to you. They go in the closet. There's no outfits for your wife, right? Your wife doesn't have clothes in your home. Your wife doesn't have shoes in your home, or there's only one outfit and one shoe. Let's be for real now, right? Let's be for real. These are fraud indicators, right? These are things that tell the officer, something does not smell right here. Because why does your spouse only have one shoe? Why is there only like 3 sets of outfits in the closet? I get we're minimalist, right? But come on now. Just let's be for real. So when they are looking at your home, they are being very practical, right? Is there pictures up? And if there are pictures up, is it just pictures of you, or is it pictures of you and your spouse? Does your home feel like a home that has 2 people living in it, right? So if they look in your bathroom, are they going to see, stuff for your spouse and stuff for you, right? I hope this is making sense. So when they're looking at your home, they are literally trying to figure out, do 2 people actually live here? And the 2 people that live there, are they the 2 people that came to the interview? Are they the 2 people that told us that they are in a marital relationship and that they live in this home? Okay? That's what they're trying to figure out when they do their home visit. Now, what happens if neither of you are home? They have an additional step. Sometimes they will knock on your neighbor's door and ask them if they know you, right? Your neighbor might just be like, no, I've never actually seen them. Your neighbor might be like, yeah, I see them all the time. They're a nice couple. Or, oh, I only see a man there. I've never seen a woman there ever, right? So all those things are things that happens at a home visit. Now, if you live in an apartment complex and there's like, you know, a mail station for every single unit and people have their names on the mailbox, but your spouse's name is not on the mailbox, that's an indicator, right? If at the interview you told the officer that you and your spouse own a car and that you park it in the place, some apartment complexes require you to have a sticker, a residence sticker. They can reach out to the complex and ask them if you and your spouse have a sticker, right? Those are things that they can do on a basic level that does not require a lot of effort. It just requires a phone call, right? So when it comes to home visits, just know they are trying to find evidence that you and your spouse do not live together. That you came to the interview, that you lied to them, that you told them you live together, but you never lived together. Those are what they're looking for. And if you have a lawyer, this is the important part now. If you have a lawyer and there's a home visit, please call your lawyer and make sure they know that you're calling because there's a home visit, right? That USCIS is literally at your door. Don't call them after. Do not call afterwards. Call while they're still at the door, okay? Because it really does make a difference. Sometimes having a lawyer on the phone makes people behave differently, right? Knowing that what they're doing is not just being heard by you, seen by you, that your lawyer is also there listening, taking notes. Those make a difference. So definitely make sure that you have your attorney on the phone if possible. And if that's not possible, please ask if you can record it. It's your home, so you can. If you have cameras in your home, that's great. So things like that, to just have evidence of exactly what happened with the officers, so that if there's anything that comes up later that they want to use against you, you have documentation that your lawyer can look at to see exactly what happened at the home visit. Okay? Just know, like I said before, if your spouse is not home at the time that the officer comes to your door, they will ask you to call your spouse and see if they will come home. They are not telling you to call your spouse because they really want them in the house. No, they want you to call your spouse to see, one, if they look over and see what they're saved as on your phone, right? They want to also see how they answer the phone, how long it takes them to answer the phone. If they're, if they're like, when you call a stranger, how they respond versus when you call your spouse and how they respond. Again, this is very stereotypical, right? USCIS is very like, this is how things are supposed to be. This is how couples are supposed to talk to each other. Whether that is real life or not, doesn't matter to them. So when you're calling your spouse, just know they are not only singing if they're going to come home, but they're looking at, where are they? What are they doing? How long did it take them to pick up? Did they actually pick up? How did they answer the phone? If they did start, if they're like, oh, okay, I'm on my way home, did they have to be buzzed in, or did they actually have the key to the door? Okay, when they came in, do they know where things are, or are they like looking at you for direction? Those are things that matter, and those are things that they look at. Okay, so just be aware of that in case you have a home visit, right? What I tell my clients is, if your marriage is real, if you live with your spouse, if you are honest in your application, you have nothing to worry about when it comes to a home visit. That's just the reality of it. Okay. Now, let's talk about the home visit that's not actually at your marital home. So let's say you have, you came to the US with your ex-husband, you two lived in the US with your kids, and then you ended up separating and divorcing. Now you're married to someone else, you live somewhere else, right? Your kids live with your ex-husband. The question becomes, does USCIS believe that you two are actually, not in a relationship anymore, that you are actually married to this person? If they have questions about that, they may do a home visit to your ex-husband's home where your children live, right? So the home visit may not just be at your marital home. They may also do a home visit where your children live, where your ex-wife or ex-husband lives. Why? Because they want to ask the same questions. They want to know if you actually live there, if you have been lying to them about living at the marital home. So they're gonna do a home visit at your actual home. If you have children with your ex, most likely they're home as well. Okay, just know that. If your ex is not home, if no one is home, they're going to talk to your neighbors. And not only are they going to talk to your neighbors, they're going to have pictures. They're going to have pictures of you, pictures of your current spouse, and they're going to ask, okay, who do you see coming in and out of here? Have you ever seen him here? Have you ever seen her here? How often do you see them here? Right? Those are the questions that when it comes to neighbors, like if you don't interact with your neighbors and your neighbors don't really pay attention to who's coming in and out, it may not, lead to anything concrete for the officer that's doing the investigation. However, if your neighbor is one of those that with the binoculars, like paying attention to who's coming in and who's going out, oh, they will tell the officer all your business. And the officers look, they want those neighbors. They want to knock on those neighbors' doors. If they can figure out which neighbor is more involved, oh, they will knock on their door. They will ask them questions, especially the neighbor that lives closest to you. All right. So it is, again, like I always say, if you actually are in a marital relationship with your spouse, if you two actually do live together, if you two actually meet the requirements of a marriage-based green card, which is living together, building a life together, there's really nothing to worry about when it comes to a fraud investigation, because what they're going to do a home visit and see that you two live together and that most of the closet is taken up by you or your spouse, right? They're going to ask your neighbor. Your neighbor is going to be like, yeah, they live here. I don't really interact with them, but yeah, they live there. They're going to, they're going to do those minor investigations and see that everything you've been telling them is the truth. So fraud investigation is not really something to be super worried about. Again, when your marriage is real, it's not something to be super worried about. But just know when it comes to the home visits, they are very serious about those home visits. They may come the first time they don't see you, they may come again. Okay. And remember, some people may be like, okay, when do they schedule the home visits for? They don't schedule it, right? They don't tell you ahead of time that they're coming. You're either home or you're not home. And then they're going to make an inference from the fact that you're home or you're not home. Okay. So if you go to the interview and the officer asks you, what's your work schedule? And you say, I only work, 3 p.m. to 11 p.m., right? Monday through Friday, 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. Okay, when does your spouse work? Oh, he works the same shift, 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. Okay. When they show up at 9 a.m., when they show up at 7 a.m. when you're supposed to be sleeping. You and your spouse better be home, or you better have a reason why you're not home. So sometimes, you may pick up an extra shift and you're at work. That's fine, because you can get your work records to show that on that day, even though this is your regular shift, the 3 to 11, you decided to take on an extra shift, right? You decided to work, you know, 11 to 7, 7 to, 7 to 3. You decided to take on extra shifts. That explains to the officer why you were not home when you were not at work, right? Because again, when you go to your interview, they're going to ask you what is your work schedule, and they're going to also ask your spouse what is your work schedule. So now they can look at both your work schedules and see what time each of you should reasonably be home, right? If you don't work overnight, you should be home like first thing in the morning. If they come at 7 a.m. and you tell them that you get off work at 11 p.m. the night before, they come at 7 a.m., it's reasonably expected that you would be home. So that's when they schedule their home visits, when they think that you should reasonably be home. Now, how long after your interview, how long into the fraud investigation do they schedule the home visits? I don't know. They don't tell us that because, again, they don't want to give any information to you, right, that may change your behavior, right? They want to catch if the person is actually in a fraudulent relationship, they want to give themselves as much ammunition to catch the person. Okay, so they don't want to give up, oh, we're coming on this date and then you change your behavior. They don't want that, right? They want to catch you in your natural state of being, and they want to basically see how, if what you told the officer at your interview is actually the truth. And again, the point of the fraud investigation is to find out if you're lying and to get evidence that you're lying. That's the point. Okay. The point is not for them to prove that your marriage is real. No, they suspect that there's fraud and they're trying to find proof of it. That's it. That's the only purpose of the fraud investigation, is to find proof of the fraud that is suspected. So when they do the police, when they search police records, when they search court records, when they search, HUD records, housing, food stamps, any government benefits that you applied for, when they search those records and find that, oh, you are presenting yourself as single, that is a fraud indicator. Okay? When they look at court records and you get arrested and the address that you gave the police or the address you gave the court is not your marital home, that's a fraud indicator to them when they're doing this fraud investigation. So it is so important that you not only understand how you get into a fraud investigation in the first place, but what they're looking for. Okay, like I said, you get into a fraud investigation because something went wrong at your interview, right? Something went wrong with your paperwork. The officer at your interview looked at your paperwork, listened to your answers at the interview, and had questions, right? They looked at everything and they're like, something doesn't sit right here. And that's usually when you are asked basic questions about your relationship and you are not on the same page at all. Like literally you're reading from two different books. That is a fraud indicator that leads an officer to put your case into a fraud investigation. Would they tell you that your case is in fraud investigation? No, they would not. You're going to check your case status and it will say your case is being actively reviewed, or you had an interview and a decision has not been made, right? You're not going to see a case status that says currently in fraud investigation, home visit may happen. No, never, never going to have that. Okay. The only time you know that that happens is if there's a home visit and you happen to be home, or two, if you are, if they find evidence that they're going to use to try to deny your case, they will send you a notice of intent to deny with all the reasons that they found during their fraud investigation that leads them to think that your marriage is not real, right? So that's what leads to a fraud investigation. Just, when you're doing your interview, it is so important to be on the same page. Again, I have a whole video on preparing for your marriage-based interview because, again, it is so important in this whole process. Now, what happens if there is a finding of fraud? Right? Sometimes USCIS does an investigation. They don't really have enough proof to say that it's fraud, but they tell you, oh, you haven't presented enough evidence that your marriage is real. And they deny it based on that. Or they will explicitly say that your marriage is fake, there's fraud. We find that this marriage is fraudulent under 204C. That is the worst case scenario. Okay, a finding of fraud under 204C basically means that if you and your current spouse divorces and you go to marry someone else, that other person is not able to file for you. USCIS is not able to approve that case unless you can definitively 100% prove that the prior fraud finding was wrong, right? That you and your former spouse were actually in a marital relationship and you have all this evidence to prove it. That's the only way you're able to overcome a 204C fraud finding. Okay? So again, it is so important that you take this whole process seriously because there is consequences to a fraud finding. Okay? If they decide to criminally prosecute your U.S. citizen spouse, they're open to that. It's up to the U.S. attorney, right? That's a federal crime, not even a state crime, right? But as far as your immigration status, your ability to get a green card basically goes out the window. Because let's say you have U.S. citizen children that are over 21 and they want to file for you. The fact that you have a fraud finding is still going to come up when they file for you. And you're going to need a waiver, which requires a U.S. citizen or permanent resident spouse or parent in order to get the waiver. So again, it's a buildup of years of issues if there is a fraud finding in your case. So that's why a fraud investigation is something to avoid, right? It is something to avoid. When you are filing your case, you need to make sure that you are putting accurate information. You need to make sure when you go to your interview that you are telling the officer the truth, because when they find discrepancies in your answers, inconsistencies in your answers, they can send it to the fraud unit. So to avoid that, make sure that you and your spouse are prepared for your interview, that you are, honest in your interview. Because again, those are the things that are going to end up coming up when they do the fraud investigation. Now, I have seen situations where a couple are truly together, right? They truly are in a marital relationship. However, because of criminal history where they put the wrong address, they put the wrong, they put their mother's address as their home address instead of their marital address, that still led to USCIS doing a fraud investigation and having a fraud finding that the marriage was not real and all of that. So again, I know when you're pulled over by the police, you may not want to, give them accurate information sometimes, but just know everything, all your police interactions, all your court interactions, your interactions with the government And government entities can come back and bite you if you are not being honest in those interactions. Okay? So I hope that was helpful. I know it was a lot, but I do hope that was helpful in basically letting you know what a fraud investigation is, what triggers it, how to prepare for a home visit, when to expect a home visit, right? Usually, depending on the type of case, I can tell you if there's going to be a home visit or not, right? And what to do while the USCIS officers from the fraud unit are in your home, right? What they're looking for, because you want to be prepared for what they're looking for. Okay. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the comments. I am more than happy to respond. If you have questions about your particular case and you want to schedule a strategy session with me, you can do that by going to my website, lilylegal.com, or by calling my office at 508-443-1788. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video, and I will see you next time. Once again, I am attorney Lillian Chukura. I am a US-based immigration lawyer, and I help my clients get green cards and citizenships for themselves and their families using the US immigration law system.